Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live interview. I'm Stan Bertolo, the host of Back in America, a podcast questioning America's culture, value, and identity. This is part of a series of interviews I'm conducting with the crew of the EPIX BBC docuseries Enslaved, the lost history of the transatlantic slave trade, starring Samuel L. Jackson. If you've missed my interview with one of the divers, Kramer Wimberly, yesterday, you can watch it on Back in America's YouTube channel. Joining me today is Sean Kingsley, a British marine archaeologist, a historical advisor to the film's crew. Sean, you're based in London. You've spent your life in libraries around the world preparing for expeditions that took you across the world, from Jerusalem to the Vatican, and from the coast of Africa to those of South America. Among your many accomplishments, you are well known for discovering the largest cluster of ancient shipwrecks in the Mediterranean off the coast of Israel. Welcome to Back in America, Sean.
Oh, hi, Stan. It's good to be back in America.
So, Sean, before we jump in, can you tell me if you want to add anything to this short introduction?
Not really, especially. I mean, I'm a marine archaeologist. I've been doing this for 30 years. I would say that this is a real hot spot right now to be doing what we're doing. It's a real golden age, largely because, you think of those dreams of Jules Verne, 20,000 leagues under the ocean. That's now becoming a reality. So, what we did 20 years ago, mucking around with scuba and shallows, now we can use it in robots in deep seas. So suddenly the world's oceans are oysters, and there are 3 million at the bottom of the ocean waiting to be discovered.
What was your role as an historian in this docuseries?
Okay, so for the last 12 years or so, I've been helping out an American team called Odyssey Marine Exploration. And they did the largest offshore survey in the English Channel looking for deep sea wrecks, where they turned up 270 shipwrecks. Anything you might imagine or want for, from French pirate ships through to German U-boats on secret missions, Britain's most iconic lost 18th century warship. And amongst all this massive shipwrecks, these 270 sites, was this very strange enigma at 110 meters that had these elephant tusks on it and copper manila bracelets that clearly had a link with England's role with the transatlantic slave trade. So when the guys were starting, Simcha Jacobovici was starting to make this film, Enslaved, which is an epic, it's taken them 2-3 years to nail down, we got in touch and they asked me at a conference, God, I don't suppose you know if you got any, of any slave wrecks out there. And I said, well, funny enough that you should say that.
That's interesting. And I wanted to ask you about these shipwrecks, and we may as well talk about it now. You've been advocating for the preservation and conservation of the small find of this boat. What's happening, and what is the importance of this boat?
Okay, so we are in southwest England, 70 kilometers offshore, 110 meters down, where there's this forest of 48 iron cannon from what's called a Royal Africa Company trader. At this period, between 1672 and 1690, the Royal Africa Company that was run by James, Duke of York and future King of England, he had the monopoly on all the trade of England to West Africa. So, this is as rare as hen's teeth. This is the only known wreck of a Royal Africa Company. The incubator when this horrific trade started, the Royal Africa Company wrote the blueprint for the transatlantic slave trade. So it's incredibly unique, and it's the earliest shipwreck associated with England's link to the transatlantic slave trade. And what we found both several years ago and during the Enslaved film, we saw that these cannon on the site is being bulldozed by fishing trawler, dragging all kinds of heavy equipment. So, in an ideal world, you'd be able to leave a wreck frozen in time for future generations and dive down there and take photos and leave bubbles. But this particular wreck won't be there for future generations. So what we're saying, based on what we've now seen with footage from Enslaved, is really we have an obligation to preserve this wreck, which means take up select finds, the small materials, the elephant tusks, maybe a few cannons, and put them in a museum so everyone can learn from this story and about what happened to ancestors of Black society in the past.
Hmm. So talking about the slave trade, can you remind us of really what happened during this period? Give us some numbers so that we realize, the extent of the trade.
Yeah, it's a really hard one to get your head around, because the numbers at some point, when you start adding zeros and zeros to them, they just become mind-boggling and you get a migraine. But we have to confront the reality of what happened over 400 years, which is that 12 million West Africans were trafficked from the homeland, Ghana, Gabon, Nigeria, all the way through what we call the Middle Passage to the Caribbean. And in that passage, 2 million people died at sea during 45,000 voyages. Most of this trade was actually managed by England and Portugal, who between them had 70% of the business. It's really hard to get your head around figures like this, but as a historian, there's been several awful spikes in human behavior down the centuries. You think, of course, of 6 million Jews being destroyed during the Holocaust in 6 years. You think about the killing fields of Cambodia, 1.3 million. Maybe some people have deep memory and they'll think of the 4 million Chinese troops who had died during World War II fighting Japan and Germany. But the difference is, as evil as Hitler was, you can understand during war some of the reasons for that. But when you think about the slave trade, it went on for 400 years, year after year after year. So you find yourself asking these really core questions of what happened to these people who died, 2 million lost? How did the merchants justify this particular trade, making money off fellow humans? And why did society, polite society, put up with it for so long?
So you're an historian. Sorry, did you want to add something?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. So you're an historian, and obviously we know a lot about the slave trade. We've studied it for some time now. Why do you think it was important to do such a documentary that took, an enormous amount of time to do, an enormous amount of money? I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but did we learn anything as we did this documentary that we didn't already know?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Stan. When you think about the transatlantic slave trade, it was a sea trade. The stage for it was the world's oceans. But that's where it's a bit strange, because there's lots of history books and, you can delve into all kinds of titles that will talk about what happened in a particular kingdom in West Africa, or what happened with a particular country. But there's really been no kind of epic take that's gone underneath the oceans. And that's what makes this really visionary and unique, is that history tells you what people want you to know. But archaeology is like a camera. It captures the essence of what really happened. And this is really brave filmmaking, to go to shipwrecks maybe that people have never heard about. It's not the Titanic, it's not the Mary Rose, and present these. So for the first time in history, we can actually smell what happened in this period, in a sense. Because it's one thing to read a book and then put it aside and go and make your coffee and watch some TV, but it's another to dive on a shipwreck and actually physically hold these objects which were around and traded and circulated and touched by human beings in the 1670s to the 1820s. And that means you can't ignore it. You have to confront it and try and make sense of it.
So did you learn anything yourself during this, the filming?
I like to think that I'm an informed human being, and after all, this is my job. I'm a professional marine archaeologist. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I could tell you about really obscure names of shipwrecks that will make your eyes glaze over. But yeah, I learned a lot. I was not expecting to necessarily, but the scale of this thing is just ridiculous. It's a kind of combination of Indiana Jones exploration meets David Attenborough on Blue Planet, going to places in the middle of Ghana, going through jungles, diving to the bottom of the ocean. Some of the scenery is absolutely incredibly dramatic. And the scenes are very emotional, which is important to pass the torch to the next generation. But, it does, for me, it became a kind of a did you know moment. So, they look at all, it's not just about a horror story about this sinister trade. It's also about uplifting. It's about enslaved black human beings who resisted. It's about white people who got on the bandwagon in abolition to help free their fellow man. And you learn so much about the legacy of West African society and how that was transmitted to the West. So there's one scene, for instance, where they go and meet musicians. I thought that the banjo, for instance, was an instrument used by hillbillies in the American South. It turns out it's based on an instrument that was brought over from West Africa. Then you look at reggae, which emanated from the slave trade plantations in the Caribbean, and it was actually music of rebellion. And at some point in the filming, they were talking about, next we're going to the Great Lakes in America, and we're filming the Underground Railroad. I don't know what the Underground Railroad, I'd never heard of it before. I assumed, did they have a 19th century shipwreck down in the Great Lakes that was carrying locomotives? No, actually what it is, and I'm sure many of your listeners will know this, it was a scene that was set up by abolitionists to help escaped black slaves from plantations and process them all the way to freedom in Canada. And so, everywhere you turn in this series, there's did you know moments.
Wow. So this series came out in the spring at a time of upheaval in all over the world, and definitely here in the US with the Black Lives Matter movement. In the US, status of slave owners have been taken down. Here in Princeton, buildings have been renamed. So, this come at a very historical time. As an historian, do you think this documentary will have an impact in the long run?
That's a hard question for me because I'm not really a politician. I'm a historian. We document what we see. I imagine that what the filmmakers wanted to do, and I can't actually speak for them, is they wanted to start a conversation. They wanted to have granddads on street corners and teenagers on their mobile phones saying, hey, did you see Enslaved? And, did you know about that aspect of ancestry? And I think it will do that by its combination of adventure, exploration, beautiful scenery, and really hard-hitting events that happened. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't imagine that the directors, Simcha Jacobovici and Samuel L. Jackson, when they started making this film, they were making a film about history and archaeology, but they ended up actually living through history. And, that's unprecedented. It really is a unique sort of moment. As you say, they were shooting in Bristol literally weeks before the Edward Colston statue, that huge, iconic Royal African Company slaver. His statue was pulled down and dumped into the sea in Bristol. And then they had the privilege to film the civil rights activist John Lewis in Washington, sadly weeks before he died. And you see Kramer and Alana from the film, from Diving with a Purpose. They go and meet him and they share their stories of these shipwrecks and what does it mean and how they can, try and make meaning out of it. And there's very much a passing of a torch, which you see there, which I think is really important for the next generations. And he gives them, in a sense, a mandate. He says to make, I forget the term, to make a kind of a good noise. Be well behaved, but shout and tell these stories time after time and time, so that the 2 million who drowned at sea, so that Westerners could put a lump of sugar into their coffee, will never be forgotten. And there's a phrase I like to use as a historian. Sigmund Freud, used to, and his cronies used to argue psychologically that to understand the adult, you must study the child. And I think it's very much the same for today. If you understand society, you have to look back into the mists of time and to try and make sense of the infancy of where we came from.
Right. And understanding history and studying history is maybe something that is not done enough in the US, which is a country that like to move forward and that like to sort of forget the past in order to say, well, tomorrow will be better. What is the importance, do you think, of looking and coming to terms with such a dark time?
I think there's two things for me, and everybody has their personal opinions, and emotions right now are very raw because what happened in this summer with rioting and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of the world, the dust is still settling on what all that means. But certainly, I come from a background where I'm not really one for censorship. I don't think we can just cancel something saying, we don't want to talk about that anymore. You can't use that term. We don't want those statues on the streets. Get them out of my sight. Because it's not out of sight and out of mind. That will still linger in your brain, and it will create some kind of other identity issue. So I think we need to very much sort of confront these sorts of issues. And by the way, one thing that I thought was really touching in the film is that the team Diving with a Purpose go to Costa Rica to meet some very young kids. And these very young kids are from a tribe called the Bribri. And for generations, their family have been saying that, you're descended from West African slaves. Well, how this can be? And there was a story of these two shipwrecks, these two Danish wrecks from 1708 offshore. And it's very touching where you can see Diving with a Purpose from Florida with their own American African identity and issues, coming to Costa Rica with their experiences, sharing them with these really young kids, some of them are teenagers, taking them to dive, showing them how to record stuff, and then finding these two Danish shipwrecks. So these guys can actually touch the shipwrecks that their ancestors came from. And then you have this wave of emotion and feeling of past and present fusing together. You would hope to help build a fairer and clearer society and future.
Right. Well, we were talking about coming to terms with history. I was thinking of the US, but obviously, us being European, we have a role to play here in just accepting our role there. And I was interested to learn that you guys in Britain recently opened a memorial in Liverpool. And we in France did the same in the port of Nantes, which was, one of the trading port of the trade slaves. So, it's good to see that some cities are starting to accept their past in Europe, but it's also a bit embarrassing to see that not more is done.
I mean, you're right. And you look at what's happened in the summer and the reaction and the kind of house of cards that started to fall down. Suddenly Lloyd's of London are saying, mea culpa, we apologize for what happened in the past. The Bank of England is saying, it was appalling, it should never have happened. Look, you can't put value judgments on what happened, but you can try and understand it and make sure that we bear witness. And I think archaeology is a very graphic way of making sure that we will never forget. I think there is this healing process. There is this trying to make a fairer, just society. But you also have very large countries that are forefront of the slave trade that to this day still have not apologized. I'm not going to name names. Check it online on your web engine searches. That's one of the reasons why, for instance, I wear several face masks. I'm a marine archaeologist. I'm a writer. It's fun from time to time to dip into films. But that's one of the reasons why I started this new magazine called Wreckwatch, which is the first popular mag about the sunken past and shipwrecks and treasures. And we're taking everyone not just to see the Titanic and understand it, but all these incredible 3 billion other wrecks around the world. So, for instance, in our last issue, we went down to Whitstable in England. Everybody thinks that wreck diving was invented by Jacques Cousteau. Well, it wasn't. It was invented by two English dudes called the Dean brothers down in Whitstable. And so, we're trying to tell those truths. And I think today, what we've been talking about very much Back in America is about truths. Just to create this, close this circle in a sense, the next issue out in December in Wreckwatch magazine is all about pirates. For the first time, we've got all the world experts who've discovered pirate ships writing under one cover. And again, you talk about what have you learned from this program? What have you learned from the Transatlantic Slave Trade shipwrecks? Well, I didn't know that in the golden age of piracy between 1680 and 1720, a lot of black slaves who were on slaver wrecks. Those ships were caught by the pirates, and the pirates didn't carry on selling and making money off the back of their fellow man. they freed those slaves and they invited them to join their crew. So here's the irony. The pirates like Blackbeard and Captain Kidd that we feature in the magazine are seen as these enemies of mankind. Actually, in this time, the deck of a pirate ship was the only place in the Western Hemisphere where, outside of West Africa, a black human being could be free and have democracy. He was given an equal vote with every other member on that ship about what should happen, and also they were given an equal divide of the spoils. But you never hear about these stories when you were growing up. You didn't see, black pirates fighting with Errol Flynn. And again, these are the truths that we're trying to bring out of the shadows of the past.
Wow, this is definitely fascinating. I had no idea about that. So your magazine is about Shipwreck. Shipwreck has, we all become kids when we think of shipwrecks. We are all attracted to the mysteries of the sunken boats. What do you think that shows us about who we are, this attraction for shipwrecks?
I guess, first of all, it just hits something, as you say, it takes us back to that innocence and romance of childhood. It's exploration, it's adventure, it's treasure. What can you find? But also, when you're dealing with underwater, compared to land, where everything's very deliberate, people live in settlements, they live there, they take their stuff away, they close, they become kind of shadows of the actions that happen there. Underwater, when a ship goes down, everything that was on it, from treasure through to parrot bones and the objects used by the crew, are frozen in time, and that allows your imagination to run riot. Whether it's inspiring works such as Shakespeare's Tempest or Tom Hanks in Castaway. And I think that's something that, at one level really gets you into it, which I think is where Enslaved works really well. You use adventure and romance and excitement, but then you can use that as a kind of staging point to ask really more deeper, penetrating, long-lasting questions.
Incredible. So where can we find your magazine?
It's digital magazine for an eco-friendly present. If you go to the website, www.wreckwatchmag.com, or go and find us on Facebook. And we'd love to have everybody on board.
Good. Well, we are coming at the end of this interview. What's going to be your next project? I know you're extremely busy. I'm sure keeping this magazine edited is a lot of work. What's your next project?
There's constantly craziness, coming out of the woodwork. We've got some writing projects. There's another spin-off from Pirates that I can't talk about right now. We've recently been working in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is the cradle of navigation. It's where seafaring in the Mediterranean world started, along Lebanon, Syria, Cyprus, Israel. And it's very interesting there right now. There's this massive capacity building of gas infrastructure. It's one of the richest gas fields in the world, and shipwrecks are starting to appear. And before that happened, we found a cluster of 12 wrecks from Hellenistic, Roman, early Islamic, Ottoman. And what we're doing is we're trying to tell the story of that and writing scientific and popular articles. And they're incredibly exciting, and because they're the first deep sea wrecks 2,000 meters down that have ever been found in these waters. And that's what you want to do in my profession. You don't actually really want to, with the greatest respect, be talking about the Titanic every week, as fascinating as it is. You want to boldly go where no man or woman has gone before, and keep on moving forward and learning about the unknown.
Good. Well, Sean, thank you so much for making time for us today, and good luck in your many adventures.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.